Hi there once again and welcome to another Expresso mechanic tutorial. And in this one we're going to be building what you can see on the screen, which is a pair of googly glasses. That's what these things are known as. The eyeballs, as you can see, are on springs and they fall away from the glasses when they tilt forward. That's basically how this is being controlled. In order to achieve this, we're going to be using a combination of Expresso, a dynamic IK rig. We're going to be using Spline Wrap and also Align to Spline. So there's a number of different things going on here in order to make this rig functional. Anyway, that's what we're going to be about in this tutorial. So without further ado, let's see if we can make this happen. We'll start by bringing in a circle and we'll make it 30 centimeters in its radius. So we're not working to any particular scale here. Not going to really worry about that too much. We can leave it as it is in its XY plane. That's perfectly good. And then we'll make it editable. So hit C to make it editable. And we'll, in our spline menu, what we want to do is clone. We need to create an outline. So that's what we're going to do. And I think 5 is probably perfectly good for that. And that gives us an outline around our circle here. The next thing we can do is command drag to copy our circle. If we just select our axis tool, command drag to copy, we'll just bring it over just by eye to around 90 centimeters away from the center of this circle. And that gives us the basic idea for our glasses. I mean, you can make the glasses however you want really, but this is what I'm going to do here. Next thing to do, I'm going to select the pair of them, hold down my command key and drop them into an extrude. And that didn't work, so I should have held down my option key, I beg your pardon. I said command extrude. There we go, that's better. Right, so we've got that on the way, and we may need something like an offset of 5 will be good for that, I think. Caps, we can add a little bit of rounding. We can say perhaps a centimetre of rounding. That should be fine for that. That looks good. So yeah, we've got the basic shape of our glasses there. Moving on from here, we just need to create the bridge part. What I'm going to do for that is bring a cube into the scene. I'll bring one of those in, and we'll just shrink this down. Again, 5 in the, let's have a look, do I need it in the, no, I don't need it in the X, 5 in the Z, probably 5 in the Y, or possibly a little bit more. Let's go 8, not 58, 8. And in the X, if I just go 20, bring this into position just roughly, and then we can make some adjustments as we need to. Let's just switch to our front view, so F4, hit H so that we can see everything, and let's just turn on snapping and select just grid point. That'll do fine, I think. Select the cube once again and just move that there. Just bring it up to somewhere around here, I think will be okay. And then we can just adjust its size, just pull this in so that it sits somewhere around there, because we're going to be doing some manipulation with the points in a minute. So if we just also select our cube, and if we, in our segments X, if we make that 3, that should give us what we want, because we can see we've got the 2 lines there. And now I'm going to hit C to make this editable and go into points mode. Select my brush selection and uncheck visible only so that I can just manipulate these points to where I want them, which is going to be somewhere there. And these 2, we can just move these a little bit, I think. Not going to move them too far, just somewhere into there. Then look as if I've got both the points there. Let's just do that again. Select both of those and just bring those over very slightly so that they're just in the thing there. And also what I'm going to do is just move these down as well. Just move them somewhere down, just down to there. That's fine. That looks good for the bridge part of these. That's going to work. I think I'm happy with that. The only thing I might do, if I go back to my front view, is select both of these points. In fact, I'll do it with the brush selection and make sure I've got them. And then just drop them down slightly so that we get that kind of shape. That's fine. I think that looks good. Now, if we want to, we could drop that into a subdivision surface to make it even smoother, but I don't think I'll bother. I'll just move it back until it sits just in the centre of the glasses there. In fact, what I may do, I don't know, I'm just looking at that and thinking, do I need to do anything else? I may not need to do anything else with it, actually. I think we'll leave that as it is. And then all we've got to do now is just make the two arms for the side part of the glasses. So again, I'll bring in a cube, change its size. If we make it, say, let's go 15 in the height and 5 by 5 once again. That should be perfectly good. If we just bring this over here, move it up so that it's somewhere. Just wants to be, I think, probably, I suppose probably about there would be okay. Let's go into the front view. Don't need you, go away. Let's have a look, see where we are. Yeah, I mean, it's not, that's not too bad. Not too bad at all. I think we'll get away with that. Just bring that back until it sits. Let's take the snapping off. Just bring that back until it sits somewhere in the middle of the glasses there. And that's okay. I mean, this doesn't have to be 100% perfect. It's quite sort of basic stuff, really quite rough stuff. It's okay. Yeah, I mean, that'll do for that. And then we can just simply command drag to copy one of those over to the other side. Just switch to my front view once again and just eyeball this in so that we've got them about the same place. Yeah, that will do for now. I mean, I will do some adjustments a little bit later, and what I'm going to do is select both of these and in their Y segments just give them 2, hit C to make both of them editable, and then we can think about doing some more work. So let's think about where we go from here. Well, the first thing to do is select polygon mode, and with the brush selection, if I just go back into there and check on visible only this time, so that I just want this back polygon on both of those, and then I can hit D for extrude and say 100. Doesn't look far off, could possibly go a little bit more, but I think for what it is we can leave that at 100. I don't think there's any need to really go any different with that. I mean, these are not going to be perfect glasses. I'm not going to hinge them or anything like that. There's just no need to for what we're doing here. You can do that if you want. We can go 120 if we really want to, just make them a little bit longer, but that should be fine for that. That looks okay. And then now we can use matrix extrude. So what we'll do is just select this point here first, MX for matrix extrude, and then we can think about what we're going to do to put the M pieces on the glasses. So let's have a look. So we've got 8 steps. That's probably okay. We'll lower this down to 5 as a starting point. Now the rotation, we'll forget about that for a minute. I'm just going to make these 100 at first because I'm not quite sure which one I'm going to need to use. Let's just apply that and see what happens. Right, so not much is happening at the moment. Let's just go back. Let's just make sure of where we are. Let's just see what happens if I do 20 there. What is going on? I only seem to be getting something very strange going on there, actually. I'm not quite sure what's going on there at all. Let's just select that one, MX. Do that again. Yeah, there's something a bit weird going on there. It's not behaving the way I expect it to for some unknown reason. I don't know why that is. Let's have a look. Have I got anything in here that looks strange? Variation none, initial per step. Let's try per step. Actually, I shouldn't need that, to be honest. Shouldn't need to worry about any of that. It should just work. Oh, hang on. What have we got here? 100%. That might be where it is. Let's have a try. Ah, that's better. Now, let's make this 5. Yeah, now we're getting something more akin to what I'm looking for. That looks good, but I'd like to reduce it. So let's see where we can go. Where do we need to reduce? Let's have a look, see if it's... Aha, that's reducing in that plane. Yeah, a little bit of reduction on there is okay. If we go 95% and then try a little bit of reduction here, maybe go 95% there. I think that will be okay. That looks good. And then we need some rotation, so we need to rotate around the y-axis just slightly. I don't need too much there, just a small amount, because glasses do tend to do that. If we go 4 degrees, I think will be enough. That's, yeah, I think that's probably going to work for us. So let's just make sure. Maybe 3. I think 3 is probably enough. Yeah, that looks good. And we'll just make this slightly bigger, I think. Make it, say, 6. See what that looks like. Does that look in proportion? Yeah, I mean, I think that looks okay. I think we'll go with that. And then all we've got to do is repeat the process with our other arm here. If we go MX once again, and all we've got to say here, I think, is -10. And that should give us, oops, doesn't quite give us what we want, does it? Go 10 there then. Let's see what we get. Okay, that is -3 here, isn't it? -3. And that's fine. And there we go. We've got a pair of glasses on their way to being finished. And to finish it off, what I actually did was drop all of these into a volume builder. So if we drop everything here into here, we can start doing some work and get this correct. So voxel size I made 0.5, which straight away gives you something resembling a pair of glasses. So that's all looking very nice. And then I did add a smooth. So if I put a smooth above it, a bit too dramatic at the moment because it's Gaussian and we don't want that. What I want is a mean curvature. And 2 iterations I found worked reasonably well for that. Okay, so that's got that pretty much where I want it. Let's just drop this into a volume mesher. So hold down the option key and select volume mesher. And now we can see that we've got it, and it's looking pretty good. Not 100% perfect maybe, but good enough for what we want. So there you go. That's the pair of glasses actually built and ready to go. The next thing to do is think about working with our circle here. We probably need to copy both of these, so I'm going to select the pair of them and command drag to copy them. And now these can be used to make the lenses. I'm just going to switch to lines here so that I can see where we are, and what I'll also do is select isopalms. In fact, what I'll do is hide the volume mesher for a moment. Now, with our circles here, we just need to switch to points mode and remove the outer circles. Don't need those, so we'll just take those away. Okay, great. And then if I just hold down my option key, I can drop both of these into an extrude. They don't need to be 100, they just need to be -1. And that gives us our lenses, and we can switch back to Gareth shading lines. Fantastic, we've got our lenses, they're within our glasses. We can move them back a little bit if we need to. We can just select them both and move them just slightly backwards. Again, by eye, not bothered about doing this 100% perfectly, but that looks good. That gives us a pair of glasses completely finished. Fantastic, so we can move on from here and we can think about where we're going next. Well, what we're going to be doing is working out how to build our first sprung eyeball. So that is going to be our next step. I'll just switch off the volume mesher once again and hit F2 to switch to a top view, and we can see one of our lenses here. I'll bring in a null object and switch the snapping back on. Now, these null objects, I actually need 6 ultimately. What I'm going to do is command drag to copy our first one, and that's 25 centimeters away from 0, which is good. Again, command drag once again, and once again. I've got 5 nulls and I just need 1 more, so I'll command drag once again. Switch back to my 3D view, so F1, and I'll just rotate around so that we can see where we are here. So I've got my first null and I've got all my others in here. If we go to our object tab and we change the shape to a circle and we set these along the Z-axis for the orientation, we've got those sorted out there. They're at 10 centimeters, which is fine. What I'm going to do in my basic tab though is change the color, and I'm going to make these green. That's great, so we can see those perfectly clearly, and I'm just going to rearrange them. So drop my first, or my null one, into the first null, and I'm going to repeat this process all the way through so that they are arranged as you can see there. Fantastic, so those are ready to go. What I'll do is just switch the volume measure off for a second, or rather close the volume measure up for a second, switch it back on, and then I'm going to group everything here. So hold down my option key, hit G, and they're grouped into a null, and I'm going to call this Googly Glasses, and just move it to the top of the object list. Fantastic, so these are ready to go. Now the next step for us is to think about building a dynamic IK rig for them. So with my initial null selected, I'll reach for a rigging tag and it will be IK. Now in our tag here, the end, we need to put null 5 in there, and then we can think about the dynamics. We'll switch this on. The strength we can leave at 30. The drag can be left at 2. Now the position hold I'm going to make 85, and we can see that that's dropped slightly, but that's okay. And then our rotation hold we can control from here, and we can see if we've got that at 100%, it's almost straight, and that's fine. It doesn't matter that it's dropped. If you wanted it dead straight, just make the position hold 100%, but we're fine with 85. But we can see that if we control this, we can see that the nulls are dropping in a nice curve, and if we take it down to 50%, that's just about where they need to be in order to make our spring, which is going to follow the positions of these nulls. We're going to set something up to make that happen. That's going to make that spring drop down and behave exactly as it should. But for the moment, let's just take this back to 100% on the rotation hold. And then we can think about the next step. Now, moving on from here, what we need is to build a spline. And it obviously needs 6 points because we've got 6 nulls. So let's get a hold of our spline pen. And all we need to do is go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that's our spline complete. But our spline needs to be, in our object tab here, we need the type to be a cubic spline, and we'll make it uniform. That's fine. So that's ready to go. That completes that part of our build, and we can just move the spline down to the bottom of the object manager. Just move it down to the last position. And then we can think about making the points of this spline adhere to each of these circles. And for that, we're going to be using Expresso. So we'll get a null, rename it Expresso, give it an Expresso tag. We've got the window open for the Expresso editor, and we're ready to move on from here. I'll bring in an iteration, so we'll grab a hold of one of those, come down to iterator, iteration, and the iteration start will be 0, the end will be 5 because we do have 6 nulls and we need to iterate through those. I'll bring in a link list. So let's see whether we can find one of those. Link list is there. Connect the iterations output port to the index port of the link list, and now we can think about populating the link list, and we need all of our nulls, so we'll just grab a hold of each of those in sequence, and that gets us those. And then we'll bring in null number 5, give it an object port at the input stage, and connect the link from the link list to that particular port. And then at the output stage we need a global position, so we'll bring one of those in. Just command click on there just to make that bigger so that we can see it. And then we need to think about what we're going to be doing with our spline, so we'll bring the spline in at the output stage, give it an object port, and then we simply need a point node, so we'll bring one of those into the editor. We've got one of those there, so we've got a point node. We can connect the object port from the spline to the object input port of the point node there, and we'll also add a point position. And then all we need to do is connect the output of the iteration to the point index, and straight away our spline disappears from the screen. All of the points have jumped to 0 on all axes. And then if we connect the output of the null 5 to the global position port to the point position port, straight away we can see that our spline is now lining up with the positions, or the points of our spline are lining up with the positions of our nulls. What I'll also do with our spline here in the basic tab is change the colour of our spline, and I'll make this yellow. And there we go, we can see our spline clearly now, and it's taking the positions of our nulls. So if we play around in here now, we move this, we can see that our spline is following the positions of our nulls. Now there's a lag problem at the moment, and that's because the Expresso needs to be moved down here. And now there shouldn't be a lag problem anymore. So let's just see what we get. Yeah, we can see that that spline is following the positions of the nulls, and there's no lag. It's doing what it should be doing. Fantastic, so that's all working perfectly. And we can think about what we're going to be doing next. We'll bring in a helix. It is orientated correctly in the XY plane, so that's fine. The start radius needs to be 20, as does the end radius. The end angle needs to be 3,600 degrees, and we can make the height 100. Now at the moment it's not facing in the right direction. It needs to turn through 180 degrees so that it can traverse the length of the spline. But don't worry too much about that, because we're going to be correcting that using a spline wrap. So the next thing we can think about doing, we'll just move this down here. We'll bring in a circle, and we'll make that 1 centimetre in the radius. And then with the circle placed above the helix, we can select both of them, hold down Command and Option, and drop them into a sweep. And that gets that part of the build sorted out. So we've got our first spring actually made. Now, as I said, what we're going to be using is a spline wrap. So we'll get a hold of one of those and we'll just drop that into the helix. Straight away, it's fitted itself to the actual helix, so it's the correct size. It needs to be +Z. And we also need to decide where we're going to actually wrap the helix around, what spline we're going to use. Well, that's obviously going to be our spline. And straight away we can see that that's now correct. Now the only thing that we need to worry about is the 2, which is going to be 20 at the start. Now we're going to actually be taking control of this with another Expresso expression, so we don't need to worry too much about that, but that's put it in its start position. And we now find that if we play around with the rotation hold slider, we can see that the spring is starting to try to follow our spline. Now the only thing it is doing, if you look here, we can see the start of the actual spring there. If we move it, we can see that it jumps. Now in order to correct that, what we need to do is copy this spline. So I'll Command drag to copy it, rename it rail, and I'm going to move it in the, so I just switch back to the model tool. I'm going to move it along its x-axis. Now what I'm going to do, in actual fact, I'll just select it, go to coordinates, and in this x-axis I'm going to make this 100,000 just to move it a long way away. And then with my spline wrap selected again, I've got a rail path in there, and I can just drop my rail in there. And now we can see that it's orientated correctly, and if we move the rotation hold, we'll find that the spring will stay put and it doesn't rotate around its z-axis as it was doing before. Okay, fantastic. So that's sorted that issue out. So our spring is made. The last thing we need to worry about is the actual eyeball, and I'll do that and then we'll work on the Expresso. So if we bring a sphere into the scene and we make this 20 in the radius, that's the correct size, and we need to make the sphere a hemisphere, and that's good. So we can drop this down here. We'll give it an align to spline tag, and our spline will be our spline path. We do need it to be tangential. We need it to be in the Y axis. Let's just see where we are. If we change our position and just bring that out there. Now we can see at the moment it's facing in the wrong direction. So we need to sort this minor issue out. Not at all difficult to do, because all we have to do is quite simply get a hold of our rail and drag it into the rail path field, and that will sort the problem out for us. So straight away we've got that fixed. Now again, we need this to be 20% in its start position. That's where it needs to sit, so that it's on the end of our spring. And as I say, we're going to take control of, well, it will be control of the position actually here, and it will also be control of the 2 parameter in the spline wrap. We're going to take control of both of those using another Expresso expression. So that's going to be the next step for us. I'll select the Expresso null again, give it another Expresso tag. Before I continue, I'll just place this one second in the queue. This is the first, this is the second. That's the order they need to be in. Okay, and we can bring in our IK tag, and from the dynamics we need the rotation hold, so we'll bring that in. Moving on from here, we need a range mapper, so we'll bring one of those into the scene, or into the editor perhaps I should say, and we can connect the output of the rotation hold to the input. Now our input lower and input upper, they're correct. 0 to 1 is fine. Our output lower needs to be 1, our output upper 0.2, and if you remember, in our spline wrap here we've got the 2 at 20%, and also in the align to spline we've got the position at 20%, and that equates to 0.2 when we're working with the range mapper. So that's fine. We can now bring both of these in, so we'll bring in the spline wrap, bring in the align to spline, and we'll give them a couple of ports at the input stage. So in our align to spline, or rather in our spline wrap I should say, we want from our object properties the 2 parameter, and the align to spline we want the position. And then if we just wire these up, that's fine, and we can close the window down. Now let's see what happens when we move the rotation hold slider, and we can see that we're getting the behavior that we want. That's fine. If we take that to around 50%, you can see that it's just dropping enough. That's about where we need that to be. So that's working fine. That's going to do exactly what we want it to do. If you go too far, you'll find that the spring will pass through itself. So you've got to be a bit careful with this. You know, 40 it's kind of okay, but it's just getting to that sort of cusp of going through itself. So I found that 50% was about where I wanted it to go. And you've got to remember that this is dynamic, so it could bounce around a little bit anyway. So I think, you know, from 100 to 50% is about right. But anyway, you can see that that's working perfectly, so that's great. So the next thing to do then is to actually copy this. So we've got all of this here as one complete rig. What we'll do is get another null. I'll just drop one into the scene, place this above the null for the where the actual IK chain is, and we'll select everything and drop these into the null and call this left eye. And then all we need to do is copy this and move it over to here. We can eyeball that through about 90, we said, didn't we? About 90 centimeters apart. That'll do. That's perfectly good by eye. And now we've got our second eyeball there. Let's just see if this is behaving as it should. So we'll just move. Yep, that's working fine. So they're both working as they should. So we've got the left eye and we've got the right eye. Let's just rename that right eye. Fantastic. So that's all exactly as it should be. Now in the Googly Glasses, what we can do, we'll just close the volume builder, or volume mesher I should say, and then just place these two in there, and then I can move that back up to the top for what it is, and these two lenses can just go under there. We can rename those actually, lens. Which one is which? I think that's the left lens, if I'm right. Yeah, that's the left lens, so let's just say left lens, and this one we can call right lens. Close the two of them up. Okay, fantastic. So everything is arranged in the glasses. So the final step then is to get the glasses to move around and then get these things to behave accordingly. So that's going to be our final step. In order to make the glasses move in the way that I want them to, I'm going to be using a combination of Expresso and a vibrate tag. With the Expresso, I'm going to be specifically taking control of the rotation P. So that's what I'm interested in there. So let's give the Googly Glasses the Expresso tag on this occasion. And then we're ready to start work, and we can think about how we're going to do this. So we'll bring in a time node for a start. And I'm going to lose the time port and add a frame port. I'll bring in a range mapper. Bring one of those in and connect the frame port to the input. The input range will be user defined. The output range degrees. We'll start with 0 and go to 150. So we want to make this happen over 150 frames. We also need to check modulo because we need this to repeat. The output lower will be 0 and the output upper -7 degrees. So I'm going to look to rock these over -7 degrees, so somewhere just around there. That's how much they're going to move. So just undo that and put it back. Now in order to control this, I'm going to be using the spline, and we just need to create basically a very squiggly sort of spline. So it doesn't really matter how it looks, as long as it's a nice squiggly sort of line that you're getting in there, it will work beautifully. So we'll just place those in there. And then a couple more points and we're done. And that should work perfectly well for us. That's a nice squiggly line that we've got in there. Okay, so that sets up our first range mapper, and we can now bring in the Googly Glasses null. And at the input and output stages, we need to give this rotation P. So we'll get that set up. And we can plumb our range mapper into the rotation P port at the input stage. The next thing to do is bring in two more range mappers. So we'll grab a hold of one of them and command drag to copy. Connect the rotation P port to the inputs and select both of them, and our input ranges will be degree this time, and our output range is user defined. So what we need to do in our first range mapper here, we'll say that our input range will be 0 to -6. Our output range will be 1 to 0.5. And the reason I'm doing 1 to 0.5, if we just open the left eye and select our IK tag, we said that we wanted the rotation hold to be a number or a value between 100% and 50%. So that's why the range mapper's output range is set from 1 to 0.5, which equates to 100 to 50%. That's why we're doing that in there. In our second range mapper, I'm going to say -6.5 in there and 1 to 0.5. So there's a slight discrepancy in how they're going to work. I don't want them to be exactly the same. Okay, so our range mappers are both set up. What we also need to do, if we just grab the both of them in the spline here, I'm just going to make this an ease out, ease in curve and twirl this open, and then look at the points here, or the tangents I should say. I'm going to make that -0.25 and this one is already 0.25, so that's fine. So that gives us a nice ease out, ease in curve for both of those. Okay, so the final step is to bring in the IK tags for both of our eyes. So just twirl the right eye open and bring that IK tag in there too. And then we just need to come down to dynamics and select the rotation holds for both of these. And plumb these in to here. And you can see they've both jumped back into their initial start positions now. Okay, so let's just run the timeline and see if we're getting anything. And certainly we are. We can see that that's doing exactly what I wanted to do. Fabulous. Okay. But at the moment we're only moving around one rotation axis. Now if we want to make things a little bit more chaotic, we can do that by using the vibrate tag. So we'll add one of those to the Googly Glasses. And we don't need relative check, so we'll uncheck that. We will enable rotation. Now the amplitude is fine actually, that doesn't need to be changed. 30, 0, 0, absolutely fine. And if we make this frequency value just 1, then we can see what we're getting from here. So let's just play the animation now. And now we can see that they're rocking side to side as well. It just gives us a little bit more motion in there. And I mean, you've got to imagine that this could be on a character's head. So, you know, your character might be dancing or something and making the Googly Glasses move around and work. But anyway, there you go. That's doing that. And of course, if you wanted to, you can use one of the other axes. You don't want to use the rotation P, but you could do it around the rotation B as well if you wanted to, but I'm not going to bother. You can have a play with that if you wish to. But there you go. You've got your Googly Glasses all working and they look really nice. And that is how you go about creating Googly Glasses. There you go. They look really great. They work fantastically well. And that brings us just about to the end of this tutorial, because I've shown you what I wanted to show you in this one. So as always, I really do hope you've enjoyed doing this one and that it's been a lot of fun and giving you some tips and some ideas for things that you might be able to use in your own projects. And if you have enjoyed the video, then please give it a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and of course ring the bell. And wherever you happen to be on social media, then please do share this video, because all this good stuff really does help keep the channel moving in the right direction. But anyway, that just about brings the curtain down on this one. So I'll see you very soon on the next tutorial.